So far, we have only selected columns from a single table. But in the real world, we quite often select columns from multiple tables. And that's what I'm going to show you over the next few tutorials. So on the left side, if you look at our orders table, let's select all the data here. In this table, we're using the customer ID column to identify the customer that has placed each order. Now, as I told you before, we don't store customers' information here, like their phone number, their email, their address, because this information can change in the future. And if a given customer has placed multiple orders, then we'll have to come back and change multiple records. We don't want to do that. That's why we have separate tables for customers and orders. Now, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to select the orders in the orders table, but instead of showing the customer ID, show the full name for each customer. So let's go back to our query window. All right, so we want to select everything from the orders table. Now we should combine the columns in this table with the columns in the customers table. That is where we use the join keyword. Now here we can optionally type inner join, because in SQL we have two types of join, inner join and outer join. We'll look at outer joins later in this section. So for now, we're only using an inner join, and this inner keyword is actually optional, so we don't have to type it. So we want to join the orders table with the customers table. Now, on what basis do we want to join these tables? Well, here in the customers table, we have this customer ID column. So if we put these two tables next to each other, we want to line up the records such that the customer IDs are equal. That is where we use the on phrase. So after on, we type out a condition. Here's the condition we need to type out. Orders.customer_ID should be equal to customers.customer ID. Now, this is getting outside of the screen, so let me break up this line. That's better. So with this query, we are telling MySQL that, hey, whenever you're joining the orders table with the customers table, make sure that the customer ID column in the orders table equals the customer ID column in the customers table. Now let's execute this query. Look at the result. Since we're selecting everything here, the first few columns are from the orders table because we have listed that first. Now, after all the columns in the orders table, we have the columns in the customer table. So customer ID, first name, last name, and so on. Now let's simplify the result set and select only order ID, first name, and last name. So back to our query, we select order ID, first name, and last name. Now let's execute the query. That is better. So next to each order ID, we can see the name of the customer that placed that order. Now, what if we want to display the customer ID here as well? Well, let's put that here and see what happens. Customer ID. Execute the query, we get an error. So if you look at the output window, down the bottom, you should see an error saying column customer ID in the field list is ambiguous. Now, unfortunately, I cannot show you this error because the size of my recording window is smaller than MySQL Workbench. But that aside, let me explain why we're getting this error. Because we have this customer ID column in both the orders and customers tables. So MySQL is not sure which table do we want to select this column from. That is why it's saying this column is ambiguous. So we need to qualify this column by prefixing it with a table name. We can either pick it from the orders table or the customers table. It doesn't really matter because the values are equal, right? So in situations where you have the same column in multiple tables, you need to qualify them by prefixing them with the name of their table, okay? Now let's execute the query one more time. So there you go. We have order ID, customer ID, and the full name. Beautiful. Now, one more thing before we finish this tutorial. If you pay close attention, we have repeated the word orders in multiple places. We have it here, as well as in the join condition. The same is true about the customers table. We have repeated that here. We can get rid of this repetition and make our code simpler by using an alias. So right after each table, we can give it an alias, O as in short for orders. So by convention, we abbreviate the table's name. Now, wherever we have orders, we should replace that with O. So here in the join condition, we replace orders with O, and also one more time, in the select clause. There you go. We can also apply an alias for the customer's table. We call it C, and then we simplify our join condition like this. So this is how we can join columns from multiple tables. Now, for your exercise, I want you to look at the order items table. So in this table, we have these columns: order ID, product ID, quantity, and unit price. Now, I want you to write a query and join this table with the products table. So for each order, return both the product ID as well as its name, followed by the quantity and the unit price from the order items table. And by the way, make sure to use an alias to simplify your code. All right, first, let's select everything from the order items table and then join it with the products table. How are we going to join these tables? On order underline items dot, well, actually, let's just give this an alias right away. So we use OI as an abbreviation for order items and P as in short for products. So OI dot product ID should be equal to P or products dot product ID. And by the way, remember that when you give an alias to a table, you have to use that alias everywhere else. So here I cannot type out products. MySQL is going to yell at me. So let's use the abbreviation. All right, this is how we join these tables. Let's execute this query up to this point. All right, so we see all the items from the order items table, followed by the columns from the products table. Now, we want to explicitly select a few columns here. So from the order items table, we want to select order underline ID. Well, technically, we don't have to prefix this with the table name because this column is not repeated in multiple places. So it's not ambiguous. So let's make the code shorter. That's better. Now we want to select the product ID column. But because this column exists in both tables, we have to prefix it with a table name, either OI or P. It doesn't really matter. Next, we want to select quantity and finally unit price. Now, actually here we have this unit price column in both tables. So this is the unit price in order items table, and this is the unit price in the products table. Now, you might be curious why we have this column in two places. The reason for this is that the price of products can change. So for each order item, we want to have the price at the time the user or the customer placed the order. So this is a snapshot of the price at a given point in time. The unit price that we have in the products table is the current price right now. This is very important for reporting. Otherwise, we cannot calculate the sales properly. So because we have the unit price column in two places, in this case, we should pick it from the order items table because this is the price at the time of placing the order. Now let's execute the query. So here's the final result.